Last night, Moon Hooch played a show. And we happened to be an hour and a half away from Tom Campbell's house. So we came by and we want to talk a little bit about consciousness. Tom Campbell is a scientist, consciousness researcher, and philosopher who has co-founded the Monroe Institute, right? Well, at least worked there for a long time.
That's maybe putting it a little strong. I didn't co-found it so much. It was Bob's. He paid all the bills all the time, so that means it all belonged to him. But I worked there from the very beginning, before the Monroe Institute existed. And it was some of the work that Dennis and I did that actually gave Bob the material and the ability to have a Monroe Institute. So yeah, I was part of the beginning of that. But I wouldn't say that I'm a co-founder. I'd be putting it a little far. But I was there at the beginning.
And at the same time, you were working for NASA at the time?
No, at that time I was not working for NASA. I was working for technical intelligence. I had a job as a physicist doing modeling and simulation of equipment, foreign equipment, to see how it worked and how it could be beaten and how it might be less. Sounds like
James.
That's all right. Cooks have to make noise. We'll just cut it and start up.
James is cooking. Hey James, we started the interview. James? Okay.
A little cooking noise in the background. All right.
Yeah. James is cooking in the kitchen. Yeah. So you had this unique perspective of working with out-of-body experiences, researching consciousness from that perspective, and at the same time, you were a trained physicist.
Right.
And in your book, you kind of brought both these sides together, and that helped to construct the worldview. Do you now refer to it as unified digital physics, or?
No, I just call it MBT.
MBT.
Yeah, my big toe. I just refer to it that way. That doesn't confuse it with anything else then. But yeah, I learned from Bob Monroe how to go out of body and what that meant and how to experience it and how to do it whenever I wanted to and for as long as I wanted to. And at the same time, I still was then too, a hard-headed physicist that needs to see the facts before I take the next step. So. There were two worlds that took me about 30 years or so before I could pull those two worlds together. For a long time it was, the physics over here and the outer bodies over there, but it really was a hard time getting them connected. Yeah. So it wasn't until the middle 1990s that it began to pull together. And in perspective, I was working with Bob Monroe in the early 1970s. So you see, that took a long time to get to that point where it all made sense in one package, where the physics and the outer body seemed to both be parts of one bigger whole thing.
And what was the key discovery or thought or experience that led you to bridge the gap between physics and out of body experiences?
Well, it was coming to the realization that I guess it was a two-step process. One, that what I was dealing with in both worlds was information. That was the common thing. Both just seemed to be information. Physics is information. This physical world is information that we take in with our senses. We have five senses, that gathers our information, and if we didn't have that five sense information, we would be no sight, no sound, no touch, no smell, no feel, we would be nothing but a point of consciousness. The reality would basically disappear. So our reality is information based, and in the out-of-body state, it also seemed that way. Reality was just information. You got information, you had to interpret it. Different people would interpret it differently, just like they do here. So both seem to be a case of getting a data stream, information, and having to interpret it, both worlds. So that was the common point. And then it occurred to me that the information was digital. You know, it wasn't analog information, it was digital information. The senses, you know, the eyes collect light, right? Well, they collect it in terms of pulses. You know, it's individual pulses, it's you know, photons, if you will. That's digital. All of our world can be more fundamentally broken down into things digital. We have a newcomer to the conversation. Maybe he'll jump in one of our laps and get on video. Anyway, so that was kind of the big thing that came together, is that it was all information, and it most fundamentally information is digital.
Because it's most efficiently organized digitally?
It's more fundamental that way. You know, you break everything down into piece parts, into bits, into ones and zeros. And that's very fundamental. You know, it's a fundamental way of describing all information. If you just look at all the analog information, it all seems very different. It's all different type, different sizes, different media, and different phenomenology. And there isn't any fundamental underlying characteristic about it, but once you realize that everything's really digital, in our brain, in our mind, we're talking about neurons, it's a little chunk of something, it's digital. We're talking about electrical pulses, we're talking about electrons, you know, digital. These are all discrete things, not parts of a big continuum. An electron is not a part of a continuum, it's a discrete piece of charge. And our world seems to be turning more and more digital the more we dig into it, right? We're having particles. Of course, particles are discrete pieces of something. So when I got the idea that it was digital, that the whole thing could be a big conglomerations of ones and zeros, if you will, then everything kind of fell together. That made this and this and this, and it made all these things kind of make sense and how they all pieced together, and then the story started to unravel, and maybe over the next, 5 years, that's how long it took me to write the books. Over the next 5 years, all the pieces tended to fall together as to how that digital then explained everything else. So that was probably the big, idea there that got the ball rolling, is that it was one, information based, and two, if you're going to describe information at its most fundamental level, fundamental way of describing all information, then you describe it digitally with ones and zeros, and then the concept that perhaps digital is more fundamental than analog. You know, we tend to have this idea that analog is kind of fundamental, and then we take that analog and we do samples to come up with a digital representation of the analog. So we think of the analog as being fundamental, and the digital is the kind of secondary thing that we extract from the analog. But what occurred to me is it didn't have to be that way. The analog could actually be made of digital as well, at just a smaller level, smaller sample size. So you see, if you get a small enough sample size, then it looks very analog. Right? And we know that from graphing curves. You know, you graph a curve, and if the curve has 20 points in it, then the curve is kind of bumpy. But if it has 20,000 points in it, then it's just as smooth as any analog signal could get. So if the sample rate's high enough, you really can't tell the difference. So then that also gave me a clue about that the fundamental source was running at a higher cycle rate. Was at a higher sample rate, if you will, or a smaller delta t than this one. So that given that this is a digital reality, then that right away tells you that it's a simulation. It's computed information. It's not just information. Where does the information come from? Well, if it's digital, it's computed information. So that took me to the concept of virtual reality, and then from virtual reality, the rest of the concepts kind of fall out. If you're in a virtual reality, then just like Fredkin logically deduced, a virtual reality can't create itself. That's illogical. It doesn't make sense. A digital reality didn't exist and then it started creating itself and now it's a digital reality. Something has to create the digital reality. It has to have a source. And that source then, you see, has to be at a higher frame rate or higher resolution, smaller delta t. And it can create what looks very much like an analog reality if it's got enough cycles to compute at that level of detail, of resolution, and then we can take that signal or whatever and turn it back into digital on our end at a much higher level, not of resolution.
Right.
Not so deep.
It's like another cycle of
Yeah, so it's just another cycle, which then kind of brought into the idea that these cycles all seem to one follow the other. It's like the same thing going on, and that looked very fractal-like.
Yeah.
And then I realized that this thing had to evolve. It's not that it's not that Big Daddy sat down and programmed it on his computer, but it's just an evolved system. And the reason I come to that is that it's too complicated for somebody to program. So you can program World of Warcraft, but if you do, every tree has to be planted there by programming.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he can make copies of trees and put them in various places, but every tree, every rock, every blade of grass somehow had to get programmed and stuck in that spot.
Yeah.
That is just too much trouble. You can get very complex things if you let them evolve. So, we take a biological cell and we let it evolve and look what we got. We got all the critters and plants and everything, living here can shown to have evolved just out of that cell. Well, how do you get this kind of complexity? How do you get, 3 trillion cells in your body all doing various things and cooperating in a way to let this avatar work the way it works? Well, that's a hugely complex, detailed thing. It's not something that somebody want to sit down and program. But if you let it evolve, you can get this complexity. And that then connected to me with, well, what else does that? Fractals do that too, right? You start with something small and you just keep reiterating on that thing. You keep going back. The input is gotten from the output, which creates a new input, which goes back into the output. It's a cyclic thing. You get fractals. And some of these fractal patterns go on forever. They don't terminate. They just keep going, you see. And then I realized that evolution was a fractal. It does the same thing. It's got your engine, your algorithms, which say, you take the output, whatever's evolved to this point, and that's where you start for the next set of evolution. And that gives you something different. And then you evolve that. It gives you something different. So it just keeps building and can get very complex, like we are, like our world is, even though it had a very simple start, and even though the engine just has a very simple rule, which is you optimize to lower the entropy, is the rule. And in our physical world, that means you have to procreate, you have to survive. That's what you have to do, to lower the entropy. So in a information world, you just lower the entropy by basically replacing random bits with bits that have meaning. So see how I'm kind of running through the ideas, how they all kind of congealed into this thing, and then 5 years worth of writing later, I kind of had it all down on paper how it worked. But those were sort of the basic thoughts that came to me. So the first big step was, it's information. Everything is information. And that would have been probably about I probably got that maybe somewhere in the 1970s or 80s, kind of got that idea, but really didn't know what to do with it. And then as time went on, I got more to the idea that it was digital information. It could be digital information. It doesn't have to be analog. It could be a higher sample rate, digital at or a faster cycle in the simulation, if you will, higher resolution. And then that opened the door for all the rest. So that's kind of the flow of the concepts got me where I was going. And of course, that's just the big stuff. Then there's all the logical consequences of that. So once you have those, then that causes logical consequences that filter down, and then you have to see where all those rabbit holes lead and where they go, and is there a rational explanation of all the data points that we've got here, all the things that we know about ourselves, about our consciousness, about our experiences like out of body, experiences, just everyday experiences, like driving your car, So we have this reality, we have a lot of experiments that have been done, which is our kind of scientific basis for facts, and we have our experience, objective and subjective. And then I just needed to see whether these concepts could derive all of that, which in the course of writing the books, then that all kind of fell out. So that's sort of the way it worked. And interesting thing was I wrote these books with the idea that I was creating a model of consciousness. And it wasn't until a couple of years after I'd published the books first, which was in 2002, February 2002, that I realized that I also had the description of science, of physics. Quantum mechanics worked in the same way that everything else works. And that C being a constant is just a matter of the grid at the base of a digital reality. You can only move 1 pixel for 1 delta t, and that's it. You can't move any faster than that because you're not allowed to jump 2 or 3 pixels in a delta t, otherwise you would be teleporting. You just need to keep it a continuous space. You can only do 1 pixel for 1 delta t, and that's the speed limit. So why does this reality have a speed limit? Well, that's why. Because it's a simulation. And it's got a grid at the base. It's got a resolution in time, delta t, and a resolution in volume, delta x, y, and z, or delta v for volume. And you can't push anything through this reality any faster than one pixel of space, if you will, for 1 pixel of time.
And that's relativity theory.
That's basically, yes, that tells you that reason C is a constant. That's why. That gives you a good reason.
Gives you a
why it's constant. And once you have C as a constant, special relativity just falls out as an algebra problem. That was the key concept that Einstein come up with special relativity. Because once you have that, then you do some algebra and you end up with these relationships that he got in special relativity. And then general relativity followed because he wanted to include gravity into the equation and make the whole thing more general than special relativity. So so that's the beginning of relativity, as it sees a constant. So then I realized, well, hey, this theory of consciousness is really also going to be a good theory of physics as far as understanding where, these ideas like C being a constant, where these concepts, where does this reality come from? And then I also realized that all the things in physics that are fundamental are things that we have no idea where they come from. Time. What's the origin of time? Mass. What's the origin of mass? It's the same thing. Charge. Where does charge come from? You see? Spin. Where does spin come from? Space. Where did space come from? See? And these are all the basic fundamentals of physics. And we don't know where any of them came from. Well, that sounds like a virtual reality. Where do they come from? They're part of a rule set. They're just, it's there because it's part of the rule set. That's the way the rule set works. You define these things as space and time. Space is defined when you locate an origin, and then you make 3 orthogonal, axes, X, Y, and Z. That's space. That's how you make space in a computer. That's the kind of space that the elf runs around in World of Warcraft. It's just a coordinate frame. And that's where space comes from. It's part of the rule set. So then we don't have to have the cause for charge, the cause for time, the cause for these things. Well, the cause is that somebody hit the run button on the simulation, and that was part of the rule set, so there they are. So how did that get to be the rule set? Now again, you might think, well, You know, did some guy have to sit down and come up with a rule set? That must have taken a while. You go back to evolution. Every time you have something that's really complicated and complex, evolution solves the problem. It starts with things that are simple and sees what the logical consequences of these simple things interacting the way they do is. And my guess that once the system wanted to create a virtual reality as an experiential space, a space to experience in, then it probably tried any number of rule sets, and they probably bombed. You know, they didn't last. Maybe they weren't stable, or this and that. So change this, change that, and let it run again. Eventually, you get one that works. That's the way, that's the way cellular automata works. That's the way fractals work. You get the right kind of start. You get cellular automata. Those are things that basically you use a computer that executes a very simple rule set. Think of a checkerboard and red and black checkers, and you can say, and you randomly put the color on them. So they're just randomly red or randomly black. Half of them are red, half of them are black, and randomly scattered. And then you make a little rule like, if you pick a checker, if there's more black checkers and red checkers touching that checker, then turn it black. And that's it. That's a rule. Just a simple rule. That's it. It's just a one-statement rule. And then you just let that thing go. And things will change. Things will go from red to black and black to red. If there's more of them touching it that are red, turn it red. You see? And things will change. You just let that run. Well, they have come up with cellular automata that have these simple little rule sets. By simple, I mean it's not like, there's 1,000 lines of code. There's probably like 2 or 3, maybe 4 statements. That's it. Just a real simple little code. And these cellular automata will just go on cranking, generating like a fractal, very, very complex patterns. And some of them don't terminate. They just keep right on going and keep right on going, and there's no expectation that they will terminate. Mm-hmm. Some of them, something simple like the red and black I just said, that'll terminate. Eventually, you'll end up with a pattern. With maybe all the blacks in this corner and all the reds in that corner, or something will. It gets to a point where you can't make another move. All the new moves leaves everything the way they are. So anyway, that's the way I think our rule set started. Somebody made up a rule set and they said, well, we're going to have this and some of that, whatever, and see what that does. That didn't last long, and a billionth of a second, it stops, it fizzled out or something. Well, let's add some of this, let's change the rules. So eventually, just with trial and error, you got a rule set that worked. And here we are. We're now avatars living in a virtual reality with a rule set that we call science. We call our physics. That's the rule set. That's what scientists do. They go dig out the rules in the rule set.
Right.
So that's kind of we want to do an intro where it all came from and how to get together. That's kind of the way. So what was the Big Bang? Well, the Big Bang is when they pushed the run button.
Right.
See, that's when they let everything go and start to interact with the rule set. So that was how it all started.
Right. And the iteration of the fractals is essentially love, in the sense that if you have multiple individual consciousness units that interact with each other, they make choices, and the choices that benefit the whole create a more resilient system than the choices that don't, right? Is that
That's
correct?
Right. That is correct. So if you end up eventually with this system being made up of a large number of individuated units of consciousness, and what does consciousness do? Well, it's an information system. They exchange information. That's what they do. They process, they have memory, and they exchange information. They process on, decide what they want to communicate to who, and pass it out, and get more back, and it's just a communication thing. And the way that interactions among individuals are optimized. We call that a social system. Interactions among a lot of individuals, a social system. The way you optimize a social system so that you minimize the amount of entropy in that social system, which is what this conscious system is. If it's an information system, it evolves by lowering its entropy. So if you're going to lower the entropy, which means evolve rather than devolve, which means raising the entropy, then the minimum entropy of a social system is when all the units in that social system care about each other. That produces the most value. That produces the least, the least entropy. So that basically then turns into what we call love. Love is about other rather than about self. If that seems hard to grasp, then look at it the other way. What if it was about self? If it's all about self, it's just about me and what I need, what I want, and how I can get more and how I can keep it once I've got it, then that says there's no trust. How can I trust somebody else that isn't going to take my stuff? Or if I have to work with that person because two of us together are tougher than just a few of us by ourselves, I only half trust them. I trust him enough that we'll work together, but as soon as I get a lot of stuff, he may just knock me off and take all my stuff too. So the trust becomes an issue. You never really can do a full trust or cooperation or anything else. It's always you against the world kind of an attitude. Even if you can group up with other people, it's still inside that group. It's still you versus the world sort of thing. That's a very high entropy situation. Somebody else figures out something really clever. That's interesting white noise we have in the background. Yeah. That's the noise of grease frying. Yeah. Sounds like. Anyway,
so essentially a tree is a very resilient social system because each cell trusts the other cells.
Sure.
That they will work together, and then that system forms multicellular organisms like the cat and us. We are all cells that love each other in the sense that they choose to work together.
They all work together.
That happens again. Now we relate to each other, and then when we build a system where we all trust each other, we become another organism, and that keeps it.
Now that other organism doesn't mean that we're just cogs in a wheel of something else, because at that level, you have more freedom, more individuality than you have on the fear side. People have this idea that, okay, the fear side, which is the opposite of love, that side, it's every individual for themselves. Mm-hmm. And people say, that does have a downside, but the upside is that everybody's free to do whatever they want, however they want to, right? Whatever they can get away with. Well, you're only free in as much as whatever you can get away with, because there's somebody else there, that's also would like to have whatever that you have, and the easiest way to get it is take it away from you. So free in the sense of that you get to make a lot of choices. When you have the love side where everybody is cooperative and caring about everybody else, they have the idea that, well, that's going to be just part of this big machine. All right, your job is to sit here and turn this crank. That's it. That's what you do. That's your job in the big collective, is to turn the crank. And you say, well, I don't want to turn the crank. Tough, it's your job, turn the crank. That's what you're going to do. It's not like that. You see, that's not caring about somebody else, because you're telling them to do something they really don't want to do. In this thing built on trust, on love, on caring about others, everybody gets to optimize as much as possible. Do what they want to do, how they want to do it, and how that fits into the whole. Mm-hmm. And people who think about that and they say, this doesn't sound like that'll work, it's because they're coming from a fear-based environment. All they can see is the person who doesn't really want to do anything that anybody else wants them to do. Isn't that a problem? But see, that's only happens in a fear-based community. In a community that cares about other, you want to do things that are helpful to other people. And if what that crank does is really helpful to a whole lot of other people, instead of saying, nah, I don't want to do that, I don't feel like turning cranks, you go, yeah, I'd really love to do that because I'll really be able to help a lot of people doing that. You see, it's a different mindset. So if you get the mindset that people are cooperative and they're caring about others, then finding a thing that you like to do, that that you're satisfied, you get some pleasure in doing, means finding a thing that's very useful to other people. Because that's what gives you pleasure. That's what you like doing, is being useful to other people. Well, if you have a whole bunch of people all trying to be useful to each other, it shifts out to where they all find a place in something they do, and that's okay. So everyone's useful. And instead of seeing, oh, I'm a brain surgeon, I'm more useful than you are, all you do is collect garbage, you don't see that. Okay, the brains need surgery, the garbage needs collecting. It's all being useful to some degree. So you don't have this stratification of who's more valuable than who by who makes more money than who. And that kind of thing. It's a job for everybody to do, and do what suits you. Do the kind of thing that gives you pleasure, you see. And you may like riding around the back of a truck. That just may be cool.
Yeah.
Or you may like cutting people's brains. That may just be cool, But whatever it is, there's all kinds of people who don't mind doing all kinds of things. And if we see it all as useful and helpful, rather than say, well, who gets paid more than who, it's everybody's doing something.
It's a different type of
it's a different kind of thing altogether. Everybody's doing something that's helpful. And if you're not doing something that's helpful, you don't feel good. You feel, unsatisfied.
Yeah.
Because what you want to do is be useful. So you go find some way to be useful. And then you don't have to, the system like that is so efficient that it's really easy for everybody to have all their material needs met that they need to have. It's not a competition for goods. It's find something that's useful. And almost everywhere there's needs. Somebody needs to tend to the crying babies in the nursery, right? That's a need. Right now, that's volunteers. It could be a job. Somebody needs to take out the trash. Somebody needs to do all the things that we want to do. Somebody needs to cook the food. Somebody needs to sit around and make videos. There's all these things that need to happen in the world, and there's all sorts of people that would be glad to do them.
And do you think that we have this innate desire to make ourselves useful because our consciousness originates from a system that is stabilized by the choices to help the whole?
Yes, that's where we get that. We all have a kind of internal proclivity to make something of ourselves, do something useful, do something that's helpful. Now, there's very few kids that grow up and say, I want to grow up and be a bank robber. I want to rip people's money off. That's really what I want to do. Well, I want to be a thug. I want to go around and break people's, fingers who don't give me their money. People don't think like that. I want to be a doctor, a lawyer. I want to do this and that. I want to be an airplane pilot. I have all these ideas of useful things that they want to be. There's this innate part of us that wants to do something, give something back, be a part of the solution. Not just be a parasite. And if you're just a parasite, you don't feel good. You just don't. Life isn't good. Even if you're a parasite and have lots of stuff, maybe you're a very successful parasite, and what you do is grab resources from everybody. You just suck the stuff up and you don't give anything back. Well, you may have all the resources that anybody could possibly use, plus more. You still feel miserable. You're just not happy.
Because the core of
you says you're a parasite. You're not doing anything. You're not giving. You're not helping anybody. You're not doing anything useful in the world. And that's what makes you happy. It's when you're caring about and doing things for other people is when you feel good. Think about the times that you really felt happy, that you really felt like life was good, and you felt a lot of just satisfaction. It's glad to be alive. It's just good. Those are times when you're doing stuff. You're making music for people. You're whatever it is you're doing, when you're really doing it and doing it well, and it works, and what you're doing is valuable, and your customers like it, or whatever, your family likes it, however that works out, whatever it is your group you're working to help does it, you feel good about that. That's the stuff that makes you happy, not collecting all the goods and having more toys than anybody else. And that's because innately we are part of a system that evolves by lowering its entropy, becoming love, and de-evolves by becoming fear, by raising our entropy, which is gimme. I don't care about you, I'll just walk right over top of you if you've got something I want. I can use you or trick you or whatever, and that's okay, because that's just the way it is, buyer beware, the fittest survive, and so on. So when you look at other people as just things you can use, you look at the environment, it's just something there to use. I want wood, cut all the trees down, they're there for me to use. I want to throw my garbage away, and it's easy to throw in the river, throw in the river. The river's there for me to use. There's other people, and these people, I can hire them on the, I can capture them. I can go Shanghai, I'm out of China, and bring them here to build a railroad, and I can use them. You see, and they'll be stuck. What can they do? They can't swim home. What are they going to do? They'll be like indentured servants. Although I can work them for so many years before I let them go, or bring people from Africa and make them slaves. It's the idea of using. You use other people, you use the environment. That's kind of where we are now. That's high entropy. That's very high entropy. And people engaged in that aren't happy people. Not for very long, not in the long-term sense.
Yeah.
The day that you win the lottery and get, $100 million, you may be really a happy person. But mostly that just doesn't work out, because unless you grow up and understand really what makes people happy, all that money will just make you miserable in a different way.
And that really comes from perverting that core drive, right?
Right.
The drive to help and contribute. And I think also like the desire to have others appreciate what you do. If that desire turns into your own service, so like I just want other people to appreciate me rather than I want to do things for them,
right? Then
that becomes ego, fear consciousness.
That becomes ego. Ego is a product of the fear. Fear and love are the two opposites. And from love we get things like caring, compassion, cooperation, all these things. From the fear side we get ego. We get expectations, we get beliefs. In other words, ego is me. It's about me. It's you are the center of your own universe. And your whole point in life is to make sure that you get all the things that you need and want. Whether that's a wife and kids and, a house in the suburbs or whatever it is you want. And if you, that ego can turn into things like arrogance. What you're saying, it's all about me. Well, I do this, and minions, you need to like it or lump it. That's arrogance. If you did that in your music, you're playing music, and you guys say, well, this is what I want to play. You guys can like it or lump it. I don't care if you like it. I'm doing it because this is what I want to do. Well, if you don't worry about who's paying the rent, or that sort of thing, maybe you can do that for a while. But it probably won't make you real happy. Eventually, you'll get tired of that. Eventually, you'll go into a slump where you're just not doing any kind of music anymore, because you're kind of running dry. You're not really creating. But when you do something that is useful, in other words, people like it. And everybody doesn't have to like it, but at least there's some segment of the people that get something out of it, that after they've listened to your music, they just feel good. You see, then it's important for you that you have that to give to them, that you can do that and get that reaction. Because there are bands and people who get wealthy, they make a whole lot of money, and they say, well, I don't want to do this pop stuff, this pop crap, it's just, it's not really me. I'm going to do this other stuff, which maybe nobody's particularly interested in. You'll see that it's not that they sit alone at home by themselves doing the stuff that they think is wonderful. It doesn't work. That runs dry. That's not a viable long-term thing.
Yeah.
You have to continually do things that are useful.
I experienced that when I was 19, very strongly, out to 20. We're in jazz school, we're just practicing 8 hours a day, like really complicated jazz stuff that nobody would listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And when I played shows, people would just be uninterested, start talking. I was like, okay, well, I'm occupying myself with a level of complexity that is not useful for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I started to look into electronic music because I really want to play for people that would listen to it and enjoy it.
Sure. That's what you are as a musician. You're an entertainer. You need to be entertaining. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do those things you like. You can still spend free time doing those very complex jazz things.
Yeah.
It's not that it's just that you can't just do that.
Right.
If you just do that, it'll create a problem. If you do that in addition to other things, where you're interacting with people and giving, then it's not like you shouldn't do anything that doesn't have an audience. That's not true. You can do lots of things just for yourself.
Yeah.
But you got to do things that give back.
Yeah.
And, you could be you could be the brain surgeon by day and play complicated jazz at night if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It's not just music. As
Right.
long as you're doing something useful somewhere, somehow, to people.
Yeah.
And that useful may even just be your family. You may take care of the kids and cook all the meals and keep the house and do all kinds of other things while your spouse goes home and brings home the bacon, and you may be Mr. Mom and do all of that and play your music. Your music that just you like and nobody else. Well, that's fine because you're still giving. You see?
Yeah.
You're giving to your children, you're giving to the wife, you're giving to the whole situation, you're helping the neighbors break their leaves, you're just doing things, and that's okay. It doesn't have to make a big splash with an audience. You just have to give.
Yeah.
It's about giving. It's not about taking. You can take some time for yourself, but if that's all you do is take time for yourself, you will not be a happy camper. You will eventually run dry and feel unhappy with yourself because that's not the way we're made.
And what do you think about selfish motivations turning into motivations to benefit the whole?
Well, you have to start from wherever you are. So most of us are combinations of fear and love. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
We're parts of that. We got this caring. There are things we care about, and people we care about, and ideas that we care about, and there are ways that we're giving back and doing things for others. But we also have that ego and that arrogance, and we're self-centered, and we want things to be the way we want it. So we try to manipulate that world out there to give us the stuff that we want, and then the stuff that the people that we love want too. We want our kids to have this, we want our spouse to have this, and so we're always manipulating that world or doing things to make it come out the way we want. So you see, it's a mixture. There's love there, and there's ego there, there's fear, there's caring, there's compassion, and there's arrogance, and it's all mixed together. So you have to start wherever you are. So let's say that you're a normal human being, which means you got a lot of fear and a lot of ego and a lot of beliefs, because you're just a normal human being. You got a lot of that stuff, and you want to have less of it. You'd like to make the ratio a little different, because now you get this much fear and only this much love, and you'd like to balance that out a little more, and you're on the way toward this much love and this much fear, but you have to take the skills you have, which will sometimes have to do with your fear and have to do with your ego. Oh, I want to act nicer, be more caring because I think that would be a better thing to do. Well, that's just intellect, you see. That's the ego. I should do this because I think that's the way I ought to be. Well, that's different than I do this because that's the way I am. I do these nice things. I care for people because I just care for them.
Yeah.
Just the way I'm made. So that's different than I care for them because I know it's a good thing to do, and I should be more caring. So one of them, you're letting your ego, which comes from the fear, kind of help you do things with the idea that maybe you'll learn to really enjoy the caring things that you do.
Yeah.
And they'll become more a part of you, as I say, from the being level rather than from the intellectual level.
By repeatedly doing them.
By repeatedly doing them and see the value in them.
Yeah.
See how that changes your life. And often, one will kind of morph into the other, where you're acting nicer, but then you say, I kind of enjoy this acting nicer. I do these things and I can see the smiles on people's faces because I do, and I like that. I should do more of it, and then it starts to build and snowball.
It becomes your being.
And it becomes your being. I do that now because this is what I do.
Yeah, right.
You see?
Yeah.
So, yes, you can't, it's not like you're in one state and you can just magically transform into the
you
other.
Have to go through
You've got to go all the steps, and you can use your ego and your arrogance to help you get rid of your ego and your arrogance.
Yeah.
But that's make it up as you go. There's no one formula for that.
Right.
You got to just make that up as you go, because some people will never get past the act kind. They never get to the be kind. And they may do a lot of good work. They may run charities. They may do all kinds of things that helps a lot of people, but it may all be coming out of their intellect rather than their being level. And at the end of the day, they're not really that happy either.
Yeah.
Because see, it's not really them. They're doing it all out of here. So it's the fear of, I'm not the way I should be. See, that's the fear that I need to change. I'm not right. I need to be kinder. Well, then that fear is driving them to be kind, but they never get rid of the fear. They still have the fear that's the animating thing. So they're doing nice things for people, but it's coming out of the fear, the ego, and the beliefs that they have, not out of being. And some people will convert and pull all that up to the being level very quickly, and other people will never do that because they don't really see the issue. They think that all there is in life is acting. They don't really see the being and acting as different things. So they figure if they're acting it, then they're doing it. Can't get any better than that. I'm doing everything that I can possibly do. Every minute I'm caring about other people. But if it's not coming out of your being level, well, it's more civilizing. Instead of causing trouble, you're helping people, but it's not going to help you grow up in it. You're still the same person you were when you started. So you have to take it from the intellectual level. The intellectual level is the guide. It kind of says, you need to change. You need to be more like this. You need to be less like that. You need to not get into these fits of anger every time somebody says something that you don't like. You need to change that. Well, first, it's your intellect telling you to back off when you start to feel angry. Go count to 10 or go someplace else for a while and come back. Don't action on that anger. But that has to not just be about behavior. It has to be about who you are. It has to get to the point that you're not good at controlling your anger, but you just don't have anger.
Yeah.
When people do those kinds of things that used to annoy you, you just don't get annoyed anymore. You see, that's the way it is at the being level. So if you have that at the being level, then you're a happy person. Nothing makes you angry. Nothing upsets you. Nothing gets you riled up. Nothing upsets you. Life is good, you see. And you may be one of those people hanging on the back of the garbage truck. And life is good. You see, you're doing something useful, you're providing for your family, you get a paycheck you don't live high on the hog, but you're doing fine. And the family's close, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of caring going on, and people, if they look at an economic model, they might say, you're not doing too well. But maybe you're doing just great. You may be evolving very quickly, doing just, really good things as far as growing up. And that's what's important. So it's not about economic success, it's about being level success. And that being level success is in terms of lower entropy, more love, more caring. So that's really what it's all about. And yes, we are, we're programmed that way. That's the way we start. That's what makes us happy. So if we're living in pain, if we have struggle and anxiety is our daily, that's what we do in a day. It's all struggle and anxiety, and there's a lot of pain in our life. It's because we aren't doing it right. We're creating that pain. It's our arrogance that's creating pain. Oh, we have another person arrived. Yay!
And does that perpetuate itself, you think, in other realities as well? That whole balancing between fear and love, or turning fear into love?
Yes, that is the basic fundamental theme in every reality. That's the fundamental theme in your dreams. It's another reality, right? In a dream, you just get put in a situation often. And what's important about that is, how do you deal with it? It's not the situation. You get put in a situation, and there you are, whatever, in the snowstorm, and there's these little children that you found in a doghouse or something, and they're going to freeze to death, and what are you going to do about it? And besides that, you're late for something really important that you have to go do.
Right.
And or you haven't had anything to eat either, for a long time, and now there's got more mouths to feed, and whatever. You just get put in a situation where there are moral choices, and then you have to make the choices. Mm-hmm. That's what your dreams are generally like. Not always, but that's a pretty sizable component of your dreams. It's the same thing going on there. You make choices, and by the choices you make, you get to evolve or de-evolve, lower or raise your entropy. Now in the dream world, all the choices you make are made out of the being level. You don't have this intellect going. If you have the intellect going, it's called a lucid dream. Now your intellect's in charge. But for most dreams, ordinary dreams, your actions in a dream are from the being level. So if in your dreams you do things that later you think, oh, that wasn't very nice, I didn't save those children, I ate them because I was hungry, Then you say, well, that's me at the being level. That's the choice. Well, that's the choice I made,
Yeah, that's what I am without my moral construct.
Yeah. So you don't have that intellect going on in your dream. You just do whatever it is you do, and then you get to see exactly who you are inside. So the dreams are very valuable. But every other reality frame out there is there for the same reason. It's all part of this larger consciousness system, and all of the avatars doing whatever they do with all of the individuated units of consciousness, working, making the choices. It's all for the same purpose. It's experiential interaction. We have lots of choices, and you get to evolve if you make good choices, and de-evolve if you don't. So that's the game. And if you are de-evolving, you're unhappy. You're struggling.
So
you have a lot of pain.
Internal guide.
Huh?
It's the internal guide.
Yeah, it's the internal guide. You're feeling a lot of pain. If you're de-evolving, then you feel a lot of pain.
Wow.
And what we do, unfortunately, is we say, well, pain, we blame it on somebody else. It's not me. I've got all this stress and all this anguish and all this unhappiness because you and you and my kids don't act right, and my spouse doesn't act right, and I got all this. That's why I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because of things in my environment, the people I know. My boss doesn't recognize my talent, and I'm grump, and that's why I'm unhappy. It's not the way it is. You're unhappy because of the attitude you have about life. You're unhappy because you're full of fear. And part of the reason you're full of fear is because you see all these things that aren't going the way you want. And you fear that you're not going to get yours, or you'll get less, or somebody else will get promoted instead of you, or your spouse will find somebody more fun than you, or it just goes on and on and on. And you've got all this fear, and that fear makes you very difficult to get along with because you're very self-centered and self-focused. And pretty soon, your boss doesn't like you, your spouse doesn't like you, your children doesn't like you, and you're going to blame all of that on them. You see?
Yeah.
But it's your fear.
Creating your own reality.
Is what's going on. You're creating your own reality with that with that fear. So we always blame what's outside of us for our pain, when most of the time, it's not always, there's always exceptions, this is a very fluid reality, but most of the time our pain is self-inflicted. We just don't see it. Because we see little pictures, we don't see big pictures most of the time. And we don't see long-term, we tend to think in the short term.
So what kind of reality should somebody expect after this one when we pass away?
Well, since your body is just the avatar, right, like the elf in World of Warcraft, then the body dying here in the virtual reality really isn't all that big a deal, right? I mean, when your elf dies, you don't go have a funeral for him and make a real big deal out of it. You just go reconstitute him, right? He gets regenerated, and you get back in the game. And it's not really a terrible, sad moment when you lose the battle and your elf gets beaten up. So it's really the same way here too. So when this avatar, this physical body, dies, then you still are the player. You're the consciousness, and you go find yourself another avatar.
In this reality, another reality,
whatever is available, whatever suits. Now, usually, when we say what suits, it means where is it that you think you will do best as far as your evolution goes. Where are you going to gain the most in your evolvement? So what kind of choices do you need to have in front of you to help you get over the things that you need to get rid of, get over the fear and the anger or ego and all that stuff? What kind of choices are going to be good there? You need to get more of experience of giving and caring and close relationships with people, maybe because you were maybe a hermit and you just couldn't deal with people before, and maybe you need that. So you can find an avatar that suits a situation that will help you do the things you need to do. Now that is not the way it works usually right in the beginning, because you just need experience. But after you've had some experience, you realize I've got certain good points, I've got certain bad points, I've got things I have to work on. Now I'd like to have an avatar that's going to optimize my chance of learning those lessons.
Do you think there is a point where you no longer regenerate and there is no more need for avatars?
No, I think probably not. And the reason for that is, what we're here to do is to become love, right? And that's about other people. I don't think there'll ever be a time when there aren't any other people that you could be of service to. See, so it's not really about you. There's going to be a time when I've become love and I don't really need to come in here to practice getting rid of entropy, but I could come here to be useful. I don't know that there'll ever be a time when you get to the point where there's nothing to do.
You're not useful anymore.
You're not useful anymore. Everybody's already love. We're all love totally. That's not going to happen, because this is not a static situation. If there were just n individuated units of consciousness, and that's all there were, and there's n in this system, and they're going to go through this system until they all grow up, then eventually you might say, well, at some point we'll all be grown up, right? We'll all be there. Well, it's not like that. It's not a closed system. There's new consciousness coming in all the time at the bottom of the pile. So it's like if you're a third grade teacher, it's not like, eventually, I won't have any students.
Right.
They just keep more and more, people keep making children and they keep coming in, and third grade's always full. Because they're always coming in at the bottom end. It's always new stuff. It's not like, well, if everybody's alive now, or the only people that'll ever be alive, then eventually you run out of third graders. You'll be done. But in a place where it's not like that, then it won't be. So I think probably not. I don't see that you're really likely to get to an end. I think you can always be helpful and useful. And the other thing is that if you're not always working on lowering entropy, entropy has a way of creeping up on you. It just happens. So the idea that, all right, now I've got this low entropy, I'm just going to sit on this rock or on this cloud, I'm going to play my harp, and I'm just going to stay this way. Well, what happens if you're not constantly working on giving, caring, cooperating, whatever, your entropy starts to grow, starts to build. It's a thing, entropy reduction always needs input, it always needs effort, and always needs work.
Do you think who or whatever hit the start button or created a Big Bang is the lowest possible entropy being?
Not necessarily the lowest possible, but probably the lowest in the,
in the bunch.
Of the bunch, yeah, probably the lowest of the bunch, because it took quite a bit of being able to construct, being able to build. Lowering entropy is organization. It took a lot of organization to create this virtual reality, another virtual reality. That's a pretty high level of organization and caring and connection of things. So my guess is that the larger consciousness system as a whole, you see, and it's not that there is this one being that's in charge. It's not the God thing. Right. It's that you have this system. And it's just a natural system. Mm-hmm. And a part of that system has to serve as the executive function. Because whenever you have a big complex system, there's rules, or you wouldn't have a complex system. And whenever there's rules, then somebody has to make the rules. Somebody has to enforce the rules. It requires an executive. That's why you have an operating system in your computer. Your operating system is your executive component, right? And your software. You get a lot of software that does a lot of other things, but the operating system is the executive. It's the planner. Now you can do this. Now you can do this. Now you can have a few cycles. All right, that's enough. You got to share with somebody else. So there has to be the one that enforces the rules, the protocols, that kind of thing. And that's what the larger consciousness system does. And it's that part of the system, that executive part, that probably said, this virtual reality would give us a nice experiential space where we can make choices that would help us grow up, rather than just sitting around here passing information back and forth. That's kind of sterile after a bit. That's limited. And so I think it's probably a pretty low entropy system, but it's still evolving too.
Yeah, it's a much more inclusive theory than all the world religions.
Yeah. It's very inclusive in a lot of ways. One, it's not us and them or us and it. The little people and the big people. It's us. We're part of the whole system. And secondly, if you are, you talk about religions. If you're a complete and total atheist, the system works good for you. There is no central God being that's in charge of everything. But there is a part of the system that serves as the executive system. I don't think the computer would think of the operating system as the God of the computer. Right. It doesn't make any sense, right? It has a function to do like everybody else.
Yeah.
Its function is, to do that coordination.
And without everything else, it's useless.
Yeah. So you have to have some coordination. So you need a coordination function. So you do the coordination function. But you need all this other stuff. The computer isn't useful. All you have is a computer and a coordination function. If there's nothing to coordinate, you see. So it's not that there's the one supreme being who does it all, but there's a part of this natural system that does the coordination, and that would be a very low entropy part. Because that needs a very big picture and it needs to care a lot about other.
Yeah.
You see, to do that, it needs to care about the system and how it all works together. And then there's other parts of it, the parts that are, you and I. We're pieces of it, and we're part of it that helps the whole thing evolve. Because here we are making choices, learning, growing up, lowering our entropy. And as we lower our entropy that much, well, we're part of the system. The system's lowered its entropy by that much. So we're... Matter of fact, we're the fast track part of that evolution because we've got this virtual reality with lots of rich choices. Whereas if you're not in a virtual reality, you're just passing information back and forth with other consciousness, and the choices there aren't nearly as rich and significant as the choices you can get in virtual reality. Therefore, that's the reason why you make a virtual reality, because it helps the evolution go better. So, yeah, that's it's good for everybody. So atheists find a home here. Deists find a home here. All those things that they were told in their religion, well, a lot of them are actually true. It's it is about love. It is about caring. We as a chunk of consciousness are kind of in the image of the whole consciousness system. We're all consciousness, and there's a lot of the basic principles of religion. Throw away all the dogma. Throw away all the rituals, throw away all the creeds and that stuff as junk. And what you're left with is, the same thing. You're left with all the good stuff. You're left with the caring. It's about others. It's about kindness. It's about giving. That's the core. That's the core of most religions. It's becoming. It's growing up. And so that fits. So whether you're religious on one hand or atheistic on the other hand, the system is very inclusive. Everybody can join it.
I find it interesting right now with the political climate in America. The Republican Party. A lot of those candidates kind of identify with the Christian religion, but they don't focus on the core of the religion. They focus on all the little detail, Old Testament details, or very exclusive things that make them feel like we are the best and we are top dog.
Right. And there's a big difference between being religious and being spiritual.
Right.
The spirituality of it is really the bigger picture. That's the caring and the love that we're talking about. You can call that spirituality. There's a spiritual component to you, and that's like the difference between your acting and your being like it. You are something. You have that. And you also can act like you're something, and those are different. Mm-hmm. So we have this quality factor about us at our being level, and that's what we call our spiritual component. Well, you can be very religious, and you can have absolutely zero spiritual quality.
Yeah.
Those two don't have to run together. They can run together. You can be very religious and very caring about other people and very loving. But you can be an atheist and very caring and very loving about people. Or you can be an atheist and you can be just the opposite.
Right.
You can be a self-centered, self-focused individual. So it's not whether you're an atheist or a theist or religious that really makes the difference. It's really who cares. Two belief systems.
Right.
And you can be very self-centered in either one of those belief systems and be de-evolving in either one of those belief systems. Or you can be very caring and evolving and working on becoming love and so on in either of those belief systems too, or without any of those belief systems. You don't need any of that stuff. So it's very inclusive in that sense that everybody is welcome here, basically to belong. All you have to really do is want to grow up. Want to be all you can be, as they say.
Do you have a practice that you use to grow yourself, like a spiritual practice?
Well, I could give you. No, I don't. And some people ask me, "Well, you still meditate regularly?" And no, I don't. But I would say that I probably meditate all the time. So it's not something I have to do at a special time. It's just a part of me now.
Yeah.
It's just the way I am. So my life is a meditation.
Yeah.
So it's like that. So I don't actually do things, a practice that I go through certain rituals or certain things that I do. But for those people who want some sort of methodology to how to grow up, how to get rid of the fear, how to lower their entropy, what I would tell them is first you have to find that fear before you can get rid of it. Because if you don't ever realize it's there, then you're like the person who's doing good but isn't good. They're doing good for the wrong reason. They're doing good because they think it should be, or they'll get a lot of praise, or it's what their mother wanted them to do, or something else, but it's not them doing it because that's what they are. That's what they want to do. Okay, so one, you got to find that fear. And the way to find the fear is to first find the ego. Ego is easy to find. Ego is when it's all about you. It's not about us. You know, it's all about you. And you can find ego by looking at any moment when you are unhappy, anxiety, angry, upset, annoyed, you know, on and on and on. The way most people spend most of, you know, every day in these kind of states. When you're like that, that's because of fear. You're like that because of fear. That's an ego thing. So whenever you have a negative feeling about anything, that's ego. And that ego is tied to fear. So take that negative feeling and you have to say, why do I feel that way? Now here's the intellect helping you out, right? Why do I feel that way? Why am I afraid about that? Why do I get angry? And you'll see, well, I'm angry because of so-and-so. And you say, well, then why does that have to be so-and-so? Why does it have to be that way? Or why can't it be that way? And you'll find it'll get back to a fear. And then you realize that that's really what's coming out of that fear. And to grow up, you need to get rid of that fear. If you do this with every negative feeling and motion and thought that you have, pretty soon you will come to the conclusion that you are full of fear, full of ego, full of arrogance, and it becomes a little overwhelming. How am I going to start with this mess? And then you realize, just pick one, just an easy one. Just pick one of those fears I traced back, and let me work on that. And just focus on that. And when that comes up to where you want to act out of that fear, don't. But don't just say, I want to act better. Say, I want to be better. I want to get rid of the fear. I want to let that fear go to where I just don't feel that way anymore. And you can do that however you can. The only thing that really gets rid of fear is courage, which means you have the courage to let it go. If your fear is that if I don't act that way, you know, nobody will like me. Or if I'm just myself, nobody will like me. I got to act in order to be accepted. Well, then you just have to have the courage to say, well, nobody will like me then. I'm just going to be myself. And then if that doesn't turn out well, you need to have to say, well, that didn't work out so well. Maybe I need to do something else. You know, so you're constantly looking at the choices you make and why you make them. And then eventually, the first one will be the hardest. You'll struggle with that one small fear for a year or two. It'll be the tough thing to do. And then you'll get over it. And it's not that you'll just not act that way anymore. You won't be that way anymore. It'll be a load off of your shoulders. Then you find the next one. And the next one will only take you a tenth as long. You keep getting easier and easier and easier once you get the hang of it. Mm-hmm. And then you just start offloading. Start getting rid of them. And then you start to be a happier camper. You know, life is good. People are good. Relationships are good. So it feeds on itself.
What does it feel in a relationship with somebody that has a fear about you that makes them really negative, and then there's also some truth about that fear?
Well, one thing, you can't change anybody else. They have to change themselves. What you can do is you can give them an environment that makes it easier for them to change themselves. That's about the only thing you can do. So if you had somebody and there's they have a fear about you, and that fear is at least has to some amount of well-deserved. You know, it's a fear that is a real thing. Then there's two ways you can go with that. It's like they can just live with it. Say, well, that's just the way he is. He's going to be that way. Every once in a while, he's going to blow his stack, or every once in a while, he's going to bring home another dog, or every once in a while, he's going to do something that I don't like. And that's just the way he's going to be. I accept it. So you can hope for acceptance, but that often doesn't happen. The other thing you can do is work on the trait that makes the other person fearful, and see if you want to get rid of that. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. And if you don't, then that person either deals with it or they're going to stay unhappy about it. So, there's no set formula, but everybody just has to be themselves, be who they are, be authentic. Don't try to act. Don't act in a different way because you think that person won't like you if you don't act that way. If you act different, just be yourself. Be authentic. And when you're authentic, look at yourself and say, well, is my authentic me a jerk? Is my authentic me just self-centered and it's all about me and it needs to be the way I want it? And the answer is yes, then you need to say, well, I need to change that and I'll start working on it. If the answer is no, then you're good to go. If that other person can't deal with it, then maybe that's not the right relationship.
Yeah.
Maybe you need somebody who can deal with you being authentic. But now if the reason they can't deal with you is because you are a jerk, because you do these things that are not nice and are very self-centered, then, well, maybe you need to change. So see, whether you change or they change or whatever, it's hard to say. Everybody just needs to be authentic, try to do the best they can to grow up, and then you let the chips fall where they may.
What if the other person doesn't accept your authentic self?
Then they can either deal with it or move on. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
See? If your authentic self is a caring self, but there's just a clash there of personality, then you deal with it or move on. This is the thing. Because if you try to be somebody other than who you are, to convince them to be somebody other than who they are, it's not going to work long term.
Yeah.
It'll work in the short term, but in the long term, it's just not going to work. It's one of those things that will deteriorate over time because it isn't honest, it isn't authentic. Things that aren't authentic can stick together with a smile for a while, but it's short term. It's not long term. Mm-hmm. So you need to be authentic, just who you are, and you need to be working on improving yourself, and after that, just let the chips fall where they may. And then you'll find that the people who really don't work well with you will go somewhere else. And the people who really do work well with you will hang out with you. Life is much better that way.
Yeah. We've been in a band together, Mike and I, for 5 years.
Oh,
and 6. And we had like a crazy journey of that. Like we started working together, not working together well at all. Like we hated each other in college. I dropped a class because I didn't want to play with him. And then, we randomly started a band by playing in the subways together as a joke. That became successful before we were even friends. And then we had like the question, like, okay, well, do we address all these issues, or do we run away?
Yeah. Well, I suspect it was growing up needed to be done on all sides. There usually is.
Yeah.
Usually that's it. And as long as people are willing to grow and see it as a growing process, see the challenge. See, there's 2 ways you can come to a challenge. Okay, that's a challenge you guys have.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't seem to be too compatible here, and that's a challenge because if we're going to work in a business together, we need to be compatible. And if you see that challenge as how am I going to get you to change to be the way I want you? That's your challenge. How can you change him to be the way you want? That's not good. That's the wrong way to look at the challenge.
Yeah.
That's the wrong challenge. And the same way opposite. He just wants, how can he get you to be less obnoxious? Yeah. You see, that's the wrong challenge. The challenge is, how can I change myself to make this work?
Yeah.
So I can accept the way he is, just accept it. It's okay. How can I make this work? How can I change? Why can't I accept it? What's the problem? And you'll probably find some ego, some fear, something down there that says, this disturbs me for those reasons. It's your own ego that's creating the problem.
Yeah.
You see? And then you have to say, well, what I need to do is not change his behavior. I need to change my behavior. I need to change who I am, not just my behavior, but first behavior. Then who I am, get rid of that fear and ego to where, however he is just fine. And he needs to do the same. You see? And then it works. But as long as you see your challenge is to change the other person, because of course you're right and he's wrong, then it'll never work.
Yeah,
it'll fester and fester until it finally just blows apart.
Mm-hmm.
But if you see your challenge is to change yourself to make the situation work, then it will work. And even if it's just you that changes, let's say he doesn't see it that way, he doesn't have a big picture, only you see the big picture that you need to change yourself, and what he sees is that you need to change to suit him, it still might work. You see? That still might be just fine. It's not like it has to work on all sides. It's nice if it does, But it doesn't have to. As long as you can let that go, then there's no problem. You see? Because what he doesn't like about you is the things that you don't like about him. It's your dislike is what makes you act in a way that makes him dislike you, and vice versa. You see, it's a thing that feeds on each other.
Feedback loop.
You see, so if you just stop that feeding process, even on one end, it works. You stop it on both ends, it's joy.
Yeah.
It's gone from working to joyful. So that's the way it is. And most people, unfortunately, see change as something that somebody else has to do to accommodate them, because they see what they want and the way they see it is the right way, and whatever they don't like is obviously not the way it's supposed to be. It's the wrong way. So that person that's wrong needs to change, not me. And everybody sees that about everybody else.
Yeah.
It's just the way it
the other
is.
way around.
Yeah, it works both ways. It's totally symmetric. And when you get to the point you say, well, it's really me. I'm the one that has a problem with this. Why? Find out why. What's the issue? Rip it up at the roots and let it go. You know, I mean, there's some issues that maybe you don't want to rip up by the roots and let go. You know, he's stealing your money. You know, he's, take his penknife out and rip your sheets apart. You know, he's doing things that are awful to you. Then it's time to part company. But if it's just things you don't like, that's your problem for not liking him, more than it is his problem for doing it. If it's nothing fundamentally wrong or destructive, then it's just.
Yeah, so when it gets to a point where one person's doing something that's actually physically destructive, or like not just a personal preference difference,
right,
then it becomes the thing that the other person needs to change, or the relationship needs to change. Otherwise, it's always
then it has to just go away. Then you have to go your own way. It's incompatible.
Right.
If it gets down to that. But as long as it's just, this drives me crazy.
Yeah.
This drives me nuts. I want to always go right, he wants to always go left. When I want to go up, he wants to go down. You know, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's not like, he's taking air out of your tires. That's preference stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, why do I need to go up so badly instead of down? What is it about that? Could we maybe go down first and then up? Would that work? What's the deal? Why does it have to be my way? Why do we have to go up first or up only? So you start questioning that, and pretty soon you get a bigger picture, and you can realize that there's a fear behind you wanting to go that way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because you want to be in charge. You don't feel secure if you're not in charge.
Yep.
If it's not something you're in charge of, then I don't know where it's going, and if I don't know where it's going, I'm nervous. I don't like it. So then it's just a matter of control. You need to be in control. Well, what's the fear? The fear is that you're out of control.
Yeah.
That it won't work for you, and then suddenly things won't be the way you want them. Oh no. You see? So that's a fear problem. You get rid of that fear, and you find out when you get rid of the need for control that you don't have to control anything. Everything just works perfectly. The need for control disappears entirely. It's not just that you give up trying to control, but the actual sense of it would be better if I could control it just goes away, because you realize it is as best as it can be just the way it is. Can't get any better than just the way it is. It's when you need to control things that you find that other things are wrong because they're not playing in your control scheme. So there's something wrong with them. When you let go of your control scheme, you almost always find everything's just fine. Matter of fact, all those things that you thought had to be this way, you find out really don't have to be that way. It's okay. And then there's almost nothing that isn't the way you want it, because you don't really have any strong wants. You're okay with everything. So because you're okay with everything, there's nothing that you're not okay with, you see?
Yeah.
Now, the control issue is gone. You don't really want to control anything. And you find that every time you try to control things, it makes everything worse, not better. That if you want to optimize your situation, stop trying to control it. It's the ego that wants to go out and force it to be the way you want it.
Yeah.
See?
Wow. yeah, this pretty much summarizes like everything we've gone through.
Totally.
Yeah. Like one thing that is really difficult for me sometimes is when he perceives me negative, you know, as like regardless of where it comes from. Like sometimes I do something wrong or whatever, but sometimes he's just really upset about something else, and then perceives me as really negative, and then I start to feel like, am I really negative? Is it my fault? You know, and then it almost like builds fears.
Right. But it comes from a fear in the first place. You have a fear of being wrong, a fear of doing it wrong, a fear of being inadequate or not up to whatever you should be, or any other kind of fear. So when somebody says, "Oh, you weren't adequate there," you see the fear kicks in, and suddenly it's the claws come out, and the teeth get longer, and you kind of go into that mode of defense, and it just makes it worse. You see, and that just, whoever had that problem, now you've just thrown some gasoline on that fire.
Yeah.
You see, so it just makes it worse. Whereas if you go, "Oh, didn't do very well there, I wasn't too adequate with that. I see, I might have done that differently. Yeah, I could see that might have been done some other way. Now, I don't know whether it would have been more adequate. I kind of like the way I did it, but, some ways okay too. I can see that. It's not, really that big a problem. Mostly you can, that's the sort of way it works out. You realize that you've got this narrow viewpoint about the way things need to be. And people need to like you. People need to appreciate you. People need to appreciate your talent and your skill and your creativity and all these other things. And when they don't, well, there's something wrong with them. You say, well, people are different. And your skill and talents and whatever look different from somebody else's eyeballs, and they look from your eyeballs.
Not everybody needs to appreciate
and they look from your eyeballs, and everybody needs to appreciate them. And if there's somebody else who really needs to have it their way, well, maybe you can be accommodating. That's all right. That's all right. If it still works. Now, again, if it just doesn't work, if their way is to do something that just doesn't work at all, guys, what I'd like to do is let's all go out and play tonight naked. You might say, that's not going to work. They'll have the police in here, we'll all be arrested in jail in an hour. This is not going to work. Well, then that's something we say, no, can't do that.
Yeah.
But if it's something else, you can say, well, let's try that. Let's see how it works. And then we'll try this other thing maybe. And if you try that thing, then maybe you'd be ready to try this other thing, the kind of what you're going to do. And maybe you can kind of see which one works best, and who knows? Both might even end up agreeing on what worked best, or that they both work pretty good. You go back and forth. There's usually easy solutions once you get your fear and ego out of the way. Yeah. Solutions are hard to come by in relationships.
Yeah, we had this crazy moment where we're playing at a farm, at a permaculture farm in where was it? It was somewhere in California. And we were trying to make a video together, playing together, and writing a song in the permaculture farm, just promote like farms and stuff like that. But for some reason we got stuck in this ego battle of who's gonna take a solo. And then we were like arguing with each other, like in front of the camera, trying to make this video about this farm. And then the little kid, an 8-year-old child, like the farmer's son, comes up. It's like, guys, first he takes a solo, second song you take a solo. And we just all bursted out laughing. That 8-year-old was like recognizing
some simple solutions. But the reason the solution wasn't simple to you at the moment is because you weren't looking for solutions. You were looking to have it the way you wanted it.
Yeah.
You weren't really looking for solutions.
Yeah.
There is only one solution, and that's that I get it my way. Because my way is best.
Yeah.
And that's just ego. Arrogance. It's easy to have a good relationship with people, with almost anybody, if you can get rid of that ego and get rid of that arrogance. Even if they are egotistical and arrogant, you can still get along with them really well. Unless, again, there's just some incompatible thing that just doesn't work at all. But for the most part, you'd be surprised who you can get along with. And I don't mean get along with grit your teeth and keep your mouth shut, but get along with them. They're fine. It's okay. All right, you feel that hard over about it, we'll do it your way. That's fine. We'll see how it works. And if it works really good, they'll know that it worked good. And if it worked really bad, they'll know that it worked bad too. But they may not want to admit it because they're egotistical and they're arrogant, so they may not want to admit it. But if you just look at, if you go fuss out and say, see, I told you, see, it worked bad, now they can't admit it.
Right.
Now they have to back up and say, no, it didn't, we're great. But if you just let it go, you see, if you don't have that ego, they know what works and what doesn't. They know it didn't work well. Don't say a word. Say, well, we tried it, you know.
Yeah.
We did our best. It was what it was.
Yes.
Enjoyed playing with you. It was a good, it was a good try. And you go away. Then the next time they'll say, well, I don't think I want to do that anymore. So let's do some other thing. So you learn through experience, and you have to let everybody learn through their own experience. You can't tell somebody something. You can't lecture them and expect them to change their mind.
Yeah, you
can't change anybody else. What you do is you give them an environment in which they can learn. And let's say he wanted to play one kind of thing and you didn't think it'd go over very well. Play it with him. If it doesn't go over very well, you've just given him the environment that'll change his mind. Whereas if you argue with him, all you've done is make him more set in his way that he's going to do it and this is the best way. Just do it. Let the thing itself tell you how it comes out. Yeah, you want the solo? Take the solo. See how that works.
Yeah.
Fine. Mm-hmm. It'll all work out okay. Everything is just going to be fine. You kind of have that attitude. You don't have to control it. Just do it. Be with it. Get with it.
Yeah, man.
That's the thing. Is you let go of the control. Say, whatever. Okay, maybe it would have been different had we done it the other way, but different's okay.
Yeah.
Let it be different. And in your mind, maybe it wasn't as good. It's okay. It doesn't always have to be perfect or whatever. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's, because there's people out there that really prefer it this way and other people prefer it that way. Your audience is mixed. Mm-hmm. There may be things he does that these people really like and things that you do that these people really like.
Exactly.
You see? Mm-hmm. It's just okay. So do it this way. Well, you can do it your way. These people will like it a little better than those people, but next time it'll be the other way around. It's all okay. No problem, you see. Just accept things the way they fall out rather than trying to make them be the way you want them. And life gets easier. Life gets a lot easier. And you'll find out that almost all the time, it works really good. Okay, you give him an environment where he learns a lesson because you just went along with him. And you did your best to do it the way he wanted it. And if it didn't work out, you don't have to tell him. He'll know it.
Yeah.
And he may just being stubborn say, well, I want to do it again. It was just a bad audience. And you do it again. Maybe it doesn't work out. Same thing. It's okay. But he'll get it pretty soon because he really wants it to work out, right? I mean, this is it. He wants it to work out. He wants it to be good. And if he tries it all different ways and it doesn't work, he'll be the first one to say, let's do something else because it's not working. You don't have to explain that to him. You see, everybody's like that. Everybody can get it from their experience as long as you're not pushing them to do something, because as soon as you push something, it pushes back. Now you just let it be, and you'll learn a lot quicker.
Let it evolve.
Just let it evolve, however it evolves. Yeah. Because see, everybody here wants it to evolve in the same way. You guys want to be successful as a group. That's your endpoint. That's where you're evolving to. And anything that takes you away from that, everybody's going to go, it's not so good. And they'll want to change it because everybody's on the same point of music, the same thing about what your end point is that it works well. Your audience likes it, you like it, everybody's having fun. It's good. So let it evolve without you having to direct it.
Yeah.
Give other people the ability to figure it out on their own. Well, we run up enough time. Dinner's ready.
Great.
Wifey's in the house.
Awesome.
Max.
Hey, thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. That was exactly what we needed to hear.
Yeah.
Nice therapy session.
That was beautiful.
Good therapy session.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks so much for your time. It was great.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of other people will get something out of that too. It's not like it's an uncommon problem. Like that's probably the most common problem in the world, and it may be between a husband and a wife, or it may be between partners in a business or whatever. But It's a very common problem. Everybody starts with a lot of ego and fear, and everybody knows what's best, and they know that it's the environment is what's causing all the trouble. It's the other people. So that's just the way human beings come, and you just have to grow up. But everybody doesn't have to grow up. You grow up and make a big difference. So that's why you grow up anyway. Even, instead of looking around and saying, "Oh, look at this place, it's full of people who are full of, evil people, full of fear and whatever. What good is it for me to grow up? I can't change this mess." Well, that's the wrong attitude. You can change that mess just by growing yourself up. Suddenly, a lot of the mess disappears just by you growing up, because you don't define it as a mess anymore. You define it as just the way people are.
It's a growth process.
Yeah, part of the growth process. So you don't get the going on in the stomach. You don't get all the tension. You don't get the anxiety. You just okay. Yeah, this is a mess, but I'm having fun. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
All right.
That food smells great.
Dude, that was a journey from physics to psychology.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We can.